Good morning. You all made it back okay, I see.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, most of them made it back.
I made it back.
Okay.
Shut up.
All right. Well, it's good to see you back in your natural habitat, I guess. What did you think about your visit down here?
Oh, awesome.
Education.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
So be more specific, somebody. Like you say, awesome, hey, great, educational.
The elevators
It
were
was
nice.
so pretty.
It was so pretty.
It's huge.
I like the
Yeah.
architecture.
Huge.
Like the chandelier.
It was cool to watch.
Dawson.
I like seeing all the different interactions in like the halls and stuff between the congressmen. That was very exciting.
I like the paint.
So do you know why we wouldn't refer to them as congressmen? Why?
Lobbyists.
Because some of them are women.
Congress
Because
people.
none of them are in Congress.
They're Washington State
Congress
statesmen.
people.
What are they?
State representatives.
Yeah, so we would call them, what's the term you would use?
State representatives. State representatives.
But what if they're a state senator?
Legislators.
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 What do they do? They make legislation, they're legislators, lobbyists. Okay.
Education.
So much for
easiest question we've ever had.
I know.
Yeah, I always thought that.
What?
Other things that were specific? So you like that interaction, like just seeing
Like
them all?
you think about that, you don't think of them like talking and like actually speaking with each other, but really there's just a lot of communication there. And that was fun to see.
Yeah. What did you find most impressive or most confusing about what you saw?
Everything
When they talk real fast.
Yeah, like
Introducing the bills.
Oh, when they were
On the
introducing the
floor.
bills, how fast they spoke.
Mm-hmm. When they were on the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're in a hurry because there's only a finite amount of time for bills that are being considered on the floor. And when the clock is running and you've got hundreds of bills, then the longer you take on your bill, that means someone else's bill isn't going to make it through. So you don't want to be the one held responsible for that. So you tend to clip right along if you can. Sometimes they'll start to stall and drag things out and have much longer debates. Like if one party is trying to kill a bill that they don't like, then they'll slow things down too. But yeah, they tend to move along pretty quickly on things, especially on cutoff day. You were there on the last day before, like at 5 o'clock that day that you were visiting was the deadline. And so bills had to be either out of the chamber of origin or dead. So people were in a hurry. Yeah. But I heard someone else talk about, say, communication. There was more communication than you thought. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I don't know. I always thought like they would just like be off on their own and they'd just be all isolated with only their people around them. But really they were with, it was like, I don't know. There was just a lot of people talking to a lot of people and it was good.
Right. There is a lot of communication, and that's what really makes this place work, in my opinion. I'd say in more recent years, things have become a little bit more polarized. You see party tensions, Democrats and Republicans not getting along quite as well as they used to. They have pretty serious differences of philosophy. But in the, I'll say the old days, it's like 20, 25 years ago, those philosophical differences still existed, but members would talk a lot more to each other and they'd spend a lot more time together. They're in Olympia, many of them are from Eastern Washington, so they're staying here, or they're from Vancouver or up north where you are. Well, they stay here, and after the committee hearings are done and floor action is done for the day, they'd go out and have dinner or spend time, play cards or something together, just to sort of pass the time. And those relationships allowed for friendships to develop, even if you have members across the aisle or in starkly different political positions. And it's those friendships that really allowed things to work pretty well down here. And it still works fairly well. Because of that communication, it's very interesting. But there are some things happening in this business that are changing that a little bit. One example, and I'm not saying this is responsible for, the breakdown of Western society or anything, but one example is that it's more difficult for lobbyists now to entertain legislators. May be familiar with a story from involving a member up your way that was being entertained fairly frequently by lobbyists who take him out to dinner. And what happens is that a lot of times a lobbyist might do that, dinner or lunch or something, and invite several members that may not know each other otherwise, and they'd get together that way and get acquainted, and that start to develop those kinds of relationships where they know each other and they can help out on bills. Maybe one's in the Senate and one's in the House, or maybe one's on a fiscal committee and one's on a policy committee. They can work together on things. And now there are rules that restrict the amount of entertaining that can happen here. And so it's just one more way that it's more difficult for some of those relationships to get established. But
are the legislators staying down there less often as well?
I say that again.
Are the legislators staying down in Olympia less often?
No, I think they're still staying down here less or as often or as much as they were, but they tend to hang out more with members of their own caucus or members of their own party, or maybe just members of their own particular philosophical opinion, rather than having this sort of cross cultivation where you'd have Democrats and Republicans or liberals and conservatives spending time together. They tend to stay more among people that have pretty similar opinions to their own. So that kind of cultivation is starting to diminish. And I think that's, in my opinion, one of the things that makes this place less effective as a legislative body. But anyway, I'm glad you picked up on the communication thing. So we are now in day 64 of the 105-day session. We're a little bit over halfway. If this were a short session, do any of you remember how long a short session is? Every other year they have a shorter legislative session that is
60 or 90?
70.
Try it, say it loud.
60 days long. So if this were a short session
Not today.
and they were not going into a special session, then we would be done by now.
Wow.
As it is, we have another month plus. One of the things that has happened at this point, you know what a cutoff deadline is. You experienced some of that frenzy when you were here last week. Do you have your bill, the weekly reports in front of you by any chance?
Yeah.
Yes.
How many of those bills on that list are still alive?
I think they're all on there.
We all have.
Well, just the ones we were, but not on the second page. And then I didn't figure the third page.
I looked through this list, and I think I need to add a couple more still, some of the bigger finance bills. I haven't gotten those in there yet, but of the other policy bills that we are tracking, I have about 15 of them on that list, and 11 of those are dead. So right now,
They'll fall off. That's what it is.
just a small handful. And that's kind of an important part of the lesson, I guess, about this place is that as you move along, the bills fall to the wayside, and that allows the bills that are still alive, it allows us to spend a little more time focusing on them. It also is, it's sort of telling because I guess I want to illustrate that the bills that are dead, in some cases they had people advocating for those bills, but not always. And it's a great example of how if you have an idea that becomes a bill in front of the legislature, you have to nudge it along every single step of the way. So what you have in front of you is you see the bills that are still alive, like the AP bills. They're both still alive. They were introduced. There were people actively working on them, asking the committee chairs where they were referred for hearings.
Break it up.
The hearings going, having people in the room testifying in favor of them, asking the committee chair then for a vote, counting the votes, making sure they had enough support to get out of the committee. Then they go to the rules committee, and that's a sort of gateway to the floor. And so the lobbyists there or the advocates behind the bill, it might not have been lobbyists. It could be the legislators that sponsor them, or it could be a concerned citizen. It could be anybody. But those people are talking to members of the rules committee, asking that the bill be moved from rules onto the floor calendar. There's a lot of activity behind each and every step of the way as the bill moves forward through the process. So right now, those two bills and the Certificate of Achievement bill are in pretty good shape. And what I wanted to do with some of our time today was talk about the hearing schedule for the AP bills mostly. The McEwen bill, the Certificate of Achievement bill, hasn't been scheduled for a hearing yet. I don't know that it will. It might. I know Drew is asking that I should say Representative McEwen is asking the chairman of the policy committee in the Senate to hear his bill, but it has not yet shown up on a hearing schedule. The AP bills are a different matter. So we have two hearings, one on the House bill and one on the Senate bill. And the House bill, of course, is in the Senate, and that hearing is tomorrow. And the Senate bill is being heard in the House committee on Wednesday, I think. I looked into the possibility of remote testimony, and it does not look like we're going to be able to do that. The House apparently has a policy where they will take remote testimony only for work sessions, but not for advocacy on a bill. And I think this is just because they're concerned that a hearing would never end if it were open and people from anywhere in the country or potentially the world could dial in and offer comments.
China.
So, right. So what I thought we might do, if you're comfortable with this, I have the comments that Mr. Lawrence sent me about those bills. And I thought I might put a cover document on top of those and just submit those comments as testimony in support of the AP bills. If that sounds okay, I would also probably, I'd like to sign in, and then I'll just go up and say a couple of words about your position on the bill, and then use the comments you've submitted through Mr. Lawrence to me as a handout. And then all of your comments will be part of the record for that bill. So that means that when the governor is thinking about whether if it gets this far, whether he should sign it or not, all those comments that you guys have submitted are in that file, and he'll be looking at them as he makes that decision. I think it's about as good as we can do if you can't come down here to testify yourself. That would be the ideal, but I don't think that's too likely. So if you're agreeable to that, why don't we do that? Does that sound all right?
Sounds awesome.
Yep.
So the next thing we need to do is figure out what you want me to say. So what I'd like to have you guys tell me what maybe your top 3 best arguments for that AP bill are.
Ooh.
AP one.
It helps low-income students by giving them a cheaper option to obtain college credit.
Okay.
Job chance.
That was nice.
That's really true. What else do you think?
I don't remember what it wrote.
So you think so why is a 3 deserving of credit at every state university and community college?
Because every class at every state university is the same.
It's an intro class.
Well, it's
It
in your
should be
class, you
2.
said they're all pretty identical, so if you take the same class at UW, you should get and you take the other class at Wazoo, you should get the same.
Or at least get credit
Or
for
get
it.
credit for it.
Yeah.
Because they're the same class, so why should one?
Some are harder than the others.
So the courses that the students would take at the university are all relatively similar courses. Right, is that? And so if you're gonna get credit at UW, why wouldn't you get credit at Wacom?
Right.
What about the example of Wacom taking a 4 and not giving credit for anything underneath that, but like Western, a
Yeah.
better prestigious college? Or,
Yeah, we have a real specific example from our area where Wacom Community College, to get credit from the AP Gov test, they have to get a 4 on the test. But they go to Western or UW, and they can get a 3 on the same test and get credit.
Okay. So it's sort of a consistency argument. It doesn't.
Yeah.
There's no logic. What is the logic, or have they provided
Never been provided any logic. That's our requirements. That's what Wacom says.
Our logic.
And Wacom's a less prestigious school than UW or Western.
It's a community college.
No.
Maybe.
Maybe.
right? We can use that example that Western or Whatcom Community College gives credit for a 4 on an AP test, where the same test at the U or at Western, you would have to get a 3 in order to get college credit.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a third point we can make about this? We'll probably have, I'm guessing I'll have a minute or 2 and in testimony.
It sounds like, does having the ability to get college credit, is that a motivation for you to take this class in high school?
Oh, sure.
Right, yeah. It's a harder class, but if there's the reward of like not having to pay for it in college, you're going to be more motivated to like take a harder class in high school and learn more.
So maybe there's a motivation for you to take harder classes in high school than there would be if you weren't getting credit for it. Then there's,
If you're not guaranteed credit, it's like
Precisely.
yeah, then you're kind of not motivated to take the tougher class. And we kind of want you to be
Pushing yourself.
taking tougher classes, like challenge yourself. Does that work? Like just the idea that it'll help motivate students more to take more challenging classes while they're in high school,
Sure.
which is something we want. We don't want you just not doing that.
Okay. Right. So I'll put little outline together of those points, and I'll put it together with the comments that you've already sent, and I'll send Mr. Lawrence a copy of all of this, so you'll see what's getting handed out to the committees. And I looked at my schedule for tomorrow. I think the hearing starts at 8, so that's easy. I don't have any conflicts, and I don't remember what the hearing time is on Wednesday for the other bill, but we will figure that out, and I will do whatever I can to get there and make sure we submit. If I can't make it to the second hearing on Wednesday, then I'll make sure that the comments are submitted anyway, so that they are part of the record. Like we talked about last week, I think we don't know which bill is going to prevail, and I'm assuming one of them is going to make it to the finish line this year, but I don't know which one. So we will do that, and then you'll be part of the record for that bill. And, also, assuming one of them gets signed, you should think about coming down here again for the signature. Because it's a long way to drive for a free pen, but you do get a.
Maybe we can like do this capital classroom one.
We could teleport. That'll be a thing, wouldn't it?
It would be a long drive for a free pen, but hey, it would be.
It's free.
It's free. It'd be a
Never give
costly free pen.
It would have special significance, I think, for you.
Yeah.
So I also neglected to check when our next connection is. We have a couple minutes left. If you have any more questions that have occurred to you since we've been talking, I mostly today wanted to make sure we covered what we need to cover for the hearing tomorrow, and I think we've got that down.
Yeah, it would be interesting if you hear anything about that certificate of achievement as well. If that gets a hearing at all, that would be one I know we'd be really interested in.
Right.
But
well, what we can do with that in anticipation, I know that Representative McEwen is working hard to get that scheduled. So in anticipation of that, we should do the same thing. We should identify 3 points that are particularly important to you all so that we can make those points in the hearing when the bill is scheduled. What do you think what's the probably the top argument you would use to encourage somebody to support that bill?
Use like the Angela.
Go ahead.
Angela.
that's a pretty specific example. But what would the argument be?
That they're
I feel there are kids out there that are really productive and effective people in our community, but they can't focus in, or like they can't remember stuff from
One
years
test
ago
shouldn't be
on some test.
like something that's so out of their control determines.
So you're asking like 20 questions to see if someone's ready to graduate, like that's kind of
And they're already like in our community.
Isn't the sponsor doesn't he talk about the fact that their federal tests and the curriculum doesn't match what the test is testing?
Yeah.
And that if a student is passing the class, is getting an A, consistently getting getting A's on their test, like midterms or whatever, then shouldn't that determine whether they should get that, whether they should graduate and not have tests that might not be tested in curriculum that they're learning?
Yeah, I think there's a really good point about the disconnect between the test and then the curriculum that's taught. Since it's a federal test, at least the ones that we do in our state are they're designed by by the Smarter Balance, and it's a federally administered test that it's not going to connect necessarily to the curriculum that's being taught in a school.
Right.
And so then why should somebody who's passing all their classes and doing well at those be prohibited from graduating simply because they can't pass a test. And like, we've got examples of students that maybe have things that are outside of their control. Just memory issues, you know, comprehension issues, translating something from what they've read, right, to being able to write about that. There's all sorts of issues that students have, and those aren't indicators of how successful they'll be in our society or what contributing member of society they'd be.
Right. I think that's a great argument.
You know, and they can't graduate. And we have a really good example of a student here who's, I think all of us kind of think about when we think of this issue. He's a kid he's in the firefight. Basically, he's a firefighter now, kind of. But he, you know, is woken up in the middle of the night, heads off to accidents and helps paramedics. And I mean, he's contributing more to our society than anybody in our school probably. And yet he can't pass these tests. He has lots of comprehension issues in reading. And so he never passes them. So he just goes in a couple times a year, 3 times a year, sometimes 4, goes in, takes them, fails them, goes in, takes them, fails them.
Wow. Yeah.
And so he, you know, luckily they're going to have some ways that he's going to be able to get around it, which is another kind of goofy thing, that there's a dozen ways to get around taking the tests. But he still has to keep doing it because there are requirements there. He'll graduate in the end. He'll become a firefighter, and he's going to do a lot of great things, but he gets to, you know, 3 times a year at least go in and feel ashamed and feel stupid.
Right. So I know people that have pretty severe test anxiety issues, and I suspect it's a similar kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that argument. And so I'll put something together for that bill as well. Not quite as urgent because it hasn't been scheduled yet. But if you're comfortable again with the same approach, where I'll take the information you've already sent me and attach it to a short cover note, and we'll be prepared for that one when it is scheduled for hearing, and we can.
Awesome. Yeah.
We can step in. Good. Good. I was going to point out that the bill that this class last year followed, the early registration bill, those have all stopped. So they did not fare quite as well this year either, again. So sometimes it takes several years for these things to happen. And the AP bill is a great example. It's been in the mix. This is its 3rd or 4th session that it's been introduced. And every year, it's a little further and a little further. I think what I've gotten from members talking about that bill, that issue, is that there is a sort of increasing level of frustration with the University of Washington is the one school that's singled out about this issue. So maybe this is the year for it.
Yeah.
We'll do what we can.
Sounds good. We appreciate it.
Okay. Well, it was great to meet you all in person. I didn't actually get all your names and stuff, but I would never remember them anyway. But
You wouldn't pass that test?
you look very familiar now. With the dispersion of these cameras. So,
Yeah.
So Mr. Lawrence will be sending you some email here. I'll let you know how things go. And after tomorrow, or maybe during tomorrow, sometime tomorrow, I don't know how long it takes, but TVW will post the hearing for the bill, and you'll be able to watch it. I will make just a riveting homework assignment. I would.
Riveting.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's an oxymoron.